Hello everyone, my name is Charles and welcome to the Round Mountain Zepbound. Now I was recently reading an article about a survey that was recently done. I believe the survey was done in January. The results just came out. The survey was done by Almada Health and they surveyed over 2,000 primary care physicians. And as part of this survey, these physicians had to have at least 10 years experience in either family medicine, internal medicine, or general medicine. Some of the results were surprising to me. Some of them weren't. A lot of it was some of the same stuff that I hear from other people online about their experience with their primary care physician and trying to access these GLP-1 medications. And you can see some of that resistance in this dynamic here. So let's get into the results. 67% of those surveyed believe that accessing GLP-1 prescriptions from a telehealth provider puts their patient at risk. Now, they did not differentiate between a traditional medical provider at a telehealth and a telehealth provider that provides access to a compounding medication in this particular instance. So for that number to be so high, I found that kind of interesting. When I started my particular journey, I was in between primary care physicians. I had just selected a primary care provider locally, but I could not get in to see her for, I believe it was 2 to 3 months. So I reached out to PlushCare, which is an online telehealth provider. They took my insurance, sent an order for my blood work, took my vitals and all of that, and then sent my prescription for Zepbound to my local pharmacy to pick up. So no compounding pharmacies involved whatsoever. And I thought that experience was really great. I had great discussion with that online provider, and my subsequent follow-up appointments were also great. I eventually transitioned my care to my new primary care provider once I got in to see her and talk to her about the medication. And she then took over and put in on my blood work orders and start submitting my prescription for refills for Zepbound. So moving on to further results of this survey, just 18% were comfortable with their patients accessing a telehealth provider to get a prescription for a GLP-1 medication, just 18%. In addition to that, 57% said they actually caution their patients against using a telehealth provider. Some of the top concerns for those surveyed were overprescribing, including clinically overprescribing, and that is 56% came back with that answer. Another 50% said they had concerns about continuity of care, including follow-up visits, titration, and or tapering off the medication, which I found surprising, that last part, that tapering off the medication, because I know there are those that do not want to take this for life, but it seems that this is a lifetime medication for many of us in order to regulate this disease and keep the weight off, keep the food noise at bay, and regulate a lot of the other dysregulated functions within our body. And studies are showing, and real world results are showing from those that are actually trying to get off this medication, that it is really, really challenging to taper off completely. You may taper down to a lower dose, but a lot of folks are finding it really, really hard to go off this medication. For me, my plan is to use this medication for life, or at least as long as I have access to it. Thankfully, I have great insurance that provides that for me. At the moment, they do. That may change in the future. And sadly, a lot of folks don't have that kind of coverage. So that's why accessing compounding medication is so important to many in this community. That sets up a perfect segue. So they also talked to them about accessing compounded medications in this GLP realm. 68% of those surveyed said they agreed or strongly agreed that compounded GLP-1s are less regulated. 55% believe that the medications are not consistent, and 47% believe that they are not as safe as the branded medication. So let's talk about that for a moment. What I couldn't gather from this is whether they were talking about those from a reputable compounded pharmacy that is regulated by a state, talking about a 503A, 503B pharmacy that are providing these medications, or if they are talking about some kind of med spa, back alley, you take the powder home and reconstitute it with water yourself type situation. I would agree with those, with that scenario, of those medications not being safe. But I know I initially had concerns about compounded medications myself, but I've been using it for the last 6 months with no issue. I know a lot of folks have not had any issues with these compounded medications as long as they're getting them from a reputable, state-regulated, compounded pharmacy. Where you run into trouble is where you're getting something from a back alley or out of the back of someone's trunk. So that definitely could cause issue. Another thing that the survey showed is that these primary care providers are putting an emphasis on lifestyle changes, and 53% require a patient try non-pharmacological avenues before they prescribe a GLP-1 medication. And this is something that I hear a lot from people in comments, not only in my post, but in other creators' posts where their provider is making them jump through hoops that the insurance company isn't necessarily doing. They're doing lifestyle modifications, even though a lot of these folks have tried those things for years. So it sounds like these providers really aren't understanding how these medications work on the disease of obesity. I know that I had to educate my new primary care provider about these medications myself when I switched over to her from the telehealth doctor that I initially started with. So I found that interesting beyond what the insurance companies are making folks do as far as trying other medications first before allowing access to a GLP-1 medication. And I do agree that having patient education on nutritional changes and things of that nature would be beneficial. I know when I went through my bariatric surgeries, as part of the program, they make you go through that. You sit with a nutrition and a dietitian to go over how you should eat, things that you should focus on, and educated you about certain foods and things of that nature. And I found that very beneficial. Even as I started my GLP-1 journey, I deployed some of those learnings into this journey, especially when I was on my active weight loss journey. Now, when these PCPs rejected a patient's request to get on these medications, some of the top reasons were given were 66% said it was not clinically appropriate for them to do so. 61% said lifestyle changes have not been sufficiently exhausted. So again, making them jump through hoops beyond what the insurance company is having them do. 49% said they rejected the request due to concerns about side effects, and 27% said they rejected the request due to safety concerns. Not sure what the safety concerns were. Maybe some other underlying health condition that would prevent them from getting on the medication, like a family history of thyroid cancer or something to that effect. Now, these doctors said they were more likely to prescribe the medication if the patient had cardiometabolic comorbidities. 75% of them said they would prescribe the medication in that instance, and 79% said they would prescribe the medication if the patient had diabetes. And outside of the cardiometabolic comorbidities and diabetes, they said that they were more likely to approve the request for the medication if the patient had one or more of these comorbidities. Cardiovascular disease, 70%, MASH, 63%, sleep apnea, 55%, hypertension, 34%. So it sounds like if you have one or more of these conditions, and if you go to your primary care provider who is not an obesity specialist, they will be more likely to approve your request for a GLP-1 medication if you have one of those 4 comorbidities. Now, that doesn't take into account what your insurance will have you do. I know a lot of them are raising the BMI above the 27 with at least one comorbidity, or the 30 BMI or higher with no comorbidity. So that's something else that you have to look into. Now, 87% agree that a GLP-1 medication should be paired with changes in your diet, while 79% believe that the medication needs to be paired with exercise to be effective. And I would say I don't disagree with that. I actually, and I really agree with the exercise, with the need to pair with exercise to be effective, because especially around strength training, because as you're losing weight, you want to maintain your muscle to keep your metabolism up and keep your overall bone health. So muscle mass is really important. So make sure that you're getting your protein in and doing some kind of resistance training, not necessarily at a gym. You can do this at home using your body weight and doing dips on your kitchen chair or doing push-ups, something to that effect, something to provide resistance training to build that muscle up. Now, another thing I found interesting is that 45% of PCPs agree or strongly agree that GLP-1 medications from a compounded pharmacy can be a stopgap. However, they do not believe it can be a viable long-term solution, which we kind of know, especially with the stuff that's going on with the shortage list and the court cases going on right now. Yet only 30% agreed or strongly agreed that they would issue a prescription to a compounded pharmacy on the behalf of their patient if the patient came to them and asked for it. And 41% said if their patient came to them and said that they were on a compounded GLP-1 medication, that they would transition them to the branded medication. So a lot to unpack there, because the patient may be on the compounded medication because they can't get the branded medication. Either their PA was denied, they don't have insurance coverage, or it's just not in their formulary. So those are all things to consider. So I found the overall survey interesting. I'll post a link in the description for the survey so you can go through it. Let me know what you think about the survey itself in the comments. Thank you for watching.